Hi there. We're here with DJ BenHaMeen, the co-writer of Jimi Hendrix Purple Haze. Let's just get right into talking about the book. And before we talk about the book, let's talk about your background. Tell us a little about your background as a DJ and your background in music.
All right. Well, I'm DJ BenHaMeen, and I grew up and was raised in Houston, Texas, in 3rd Ward, and I started DJing in high school. I've been doing it ever since. It was pretty much my second love after film became music, and I attended Howard University. Shout out to HU. And that's where I really learned how to DJ. It's where I really owned my skills and talents, and I DJed in DC for a long time. And it's taken me all around the world and everything. And my love of music is a big part of why, or one of the reasons that I wanted to write this book, and why I injected it with my love of music and the history of music and the culture that surrounds it.
Gotcha. So, in a parallel track, tell us your background in comics, both as an audience member, a reader, and as a creator.
Okay, well, I started off, I cannot remember a time when I wasn't reading comics. I think some of the very first comics that I ever read were Chris Claremont's X-Men, and I've been reading and enjoying comics, like I said, as long as I can remember. So it's always been a big part of my life, and I didn't really ever think that I was going to write comics, honestly. I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I wanted to write scripts and things of that nature. So I wanted to do that more than I wanted to write comics. So writing comics kind of came out of nowhere. So yeah, I
could definitely relate to that. Well, I mean, for me, I was very interested in film as well, and I just don't have the extra, $5 million in my back pocket to subsidize film, but to subsidize a comic, that's a little more reasonable.
Yes.
So that's where a lot of us gravitate. So where did the concept for Jimi Hendrix Purple Haze come from? And give us a little bit of an elevator pitch of what it is. It's not your straight musical biography. It's an interesting take. Tell us the story a little bit and how you came to the concept.
Okay, well, I came to the concept by my partner, my co-writer, Mello Brown, who we've written a few things together. We've written scripts. We worked on American Gods, the television series, together. And he was writing Blade Runner for Titan Comics already. They asked him to pitch on Jimi Hendrix, the Purple Haze. They wanted to do a graphic novel with the estate. And the only stipulation they had was they didn't want it to be a standard autobiographical graphic novel. They wanted it to have some science fiction or fantasy elements to it. And so that's where we came in, and that's where we started pitching. And then my big pitch, my big idea that I really wanted to convey was I wanted to talk about the history of Black music in America, and one of the concepts that's in the book is this idea of the river of Black music and how it's been a part of American culture since the beginning, and how it's always been used as a form of resistance and revolution. And those are the big themes that we wanted to talk about in the book, and that's where we started at.
Cool. And catching on those themes, one of the aspects of the story, it's set in the future, but the struggles are still the same.
Yes.
We've got struggles with class, nationalities, war, and was that a choice just for this project? Or do you feel like, we're not headed for that Gene Roddenberry Star Trek future that we all dream of?
I think that I was discussing this recently. I think last night actually I was discussing this, and it's something we talked about on my podcast ForAllNerds as well. I'm more interested in a Gene Roddenberry Star Trek future than I am in a Mad Max-esque future. But I also feel like we have a lot of things to work through to get to that Gene Roddenberry-esque future. And I wanted Purple Haze to be more of a Gene Roddenberry-esque feeling than it was of a Mad Max-esque feeling. I wanted it to give hope. That was one of the main things we did when we wrote this book, is that we wanted it to inspire people, to show people that, you know, music and revolution can always be achieved, and to always fight for what you believe in, and to stand strong in what you believe in. So yeah, I was leaning more towards the Gene Roddenberry when I wrote this.
Gotcha. So you spoke about water and the river a little bit already, but one of the things that struck me in the book was, you know, you've got water and energy and fire, these sort of elemental forces, and those feel to me very Hendrix. And what drew you to using those sorts of elements in the story?
Oh, that's interesting. I think it was something that, like I said, the idea of a river of music is a concept that I've had and others have had, obviously, for a long time. So it just felt like this was the perfect place to use it. And then the elemental part, that's interesting that you picked up on that. I think that just comes from, especially fire, comes from the idea that, you know, fire is something that you're reborn in, the rebirth. Revolution, again, going back to fire, is something that we felt was strong in it. And I think that's just also with Jimi Hendrix, like you say, his music, you know, is very elemental in itself. So I think that's just representative of it in there. And it, yeah, I'm stuck on that, because that's a really great question. And now I'm like, wow, I didn't.
Maybe you didn't consciously think about it.
It
just kind of works through you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. There's one little piece of the story that really resonated with me, and in this exact moment, I think it'd be interesting to talk about, because you are here, sort of coming home to Houston for your visit, and there's a line in the book about when people say you can't go home again, and you know, that's a phrase I've heard a number of times throughout my life, and never really thought hard about it. It's just one of them phrases out there, but you kind of elaborate on that in a very interesting way, and tell us a little bit about that and why you felt that was an important element to put in the story.
That's so funny too, because that was one of that moment. That's definitely a page I wrote myself, and it was just like you said. I've heard that phrase before. You know, you can't go home again, and then it just struck me is that it's not that you can't go home again. It's that we're always changed by our experiences, by everything. So even if like this was the first time I've ever walked into Gulf Coast Cosmos Comics, so I come in here with, oh, this is nice. But then the next time I come in here, I'll be like, oh, I did this interview here with Milton. You know, I'll have those memories of it. You know, I was like, oh, I sold books here, this and all these things. So it's been changed. So it's just, even though if it's tomorrow, you know, it's not like it's been a long time. It's just you can't go anywhere twice. You know, everything, you carry all your experiences with you through this life. Yeah. And we're changed by those experiences. So you become a different person every time. Even like, I've been reading a lot about music lately for my next project. I'm always reading about music in general, but it's like even when you hear the song, you know, if you hear a song once and then you hear it again a different day, it's a different song to you, because now your life experiences are affecting the way you hear it. Or even like books. I remember one of my favorite books, and a big influence on everything I write, is The Wicked and Divine. And halfway through reading that book, my mom passed away. And Karen Gillan had said that the book was inspired by his father passing. Oh, wow. So when my mom passed, the book took on a completely different meaning to me, because I started saying, oh, dude, I get it. Yeah. Like I've even told Karen, I was like, I get it. You know, I get what the book is saying now. The idea that it's going to be okay. I get it, bro. And so it took a whole different thing to me. And hopefully, you know, this book does that with people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways that you guys have structured this story is it feels very, you're dropped in a set of relationships and settings with characters that have very tangible backstories. There are old scores to settle. There's attitudes and opinions on people and places. It feels very much of history impacting the present. You know, if this, you know, we call it the purple verse. If this was the purple verse, this is all you're starting sort of like George Lucas with Episode 4.
Yes,
we're starting.
I'm glad you caught that.
Yeah. And I wonder, is that something that you did specifically for this project, or is that the kind of thing you like to do generally?
I think specifically for this project, I think that's just a great form of storytelling. As a writer, I'm sure just throwing people into the middle of something and then letting them figure out everything that's going around. And then it also, to me, I felt like it gives this universe, like you say, the purple verse. It gives it a feeling of being lived in. There are things that happen before you meet these characters, and they're talking about situations that they've had with each other or places they've been. And those were always just my favorite kind of comic books. I remember Alpha Flight growing up when John Byrne was writing it. He once says Puck makes a reference to the Bronze Bishop. This is like that adventure I had with the Bronze Bishop. So for the rest of the time I'm reading Alpha Flight, I'm like, this is the Bronze Bishop. What was that with Puck? And I never knew, but it just made Puck seem like, okay, he's been around the world. Yeah. He's seen some things, that before I got to know this character. And so that was something that we did. And then I just think the Star Wars influence, when I was like, okay, we're writing a space opera, what's the greatest space opera to me is Star Wars. So I think that just was immediate, okay, this is going to be my New Hope, where it's right in the middle of this. And then when you're dealing with a war, war is usually, it's bigger than you, and it's bigger than any one person. So we had to give that sense of it, that this has been going on before Hendrix came into it, and it might be going on even after. And even when I wrote it, when I told the story to a good friend of mine, I just, I sat down with him and I just told him the whole story. And he was like, that's great, but that's not it, right? And I'm like, I know it's not it, man. That's what the sequel is for.
Yeah.
But that gave me, that really hyped me up, because I was like, this is not it. And this is just the beginning.
So one of the things that strikes readers of the book, I believe, and you've already talked about this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little more, talk a little bit about the importance of music in fighting the forces of oppression.
Oh, man. I think the importance of it can't be overstated. It's just, it's been a constant, since, especially as Black people in America, since we arrived on these shores, music has been our guiding force. The drums were the first thing that we used to communicate with each other, to tell ourselves, things about what, other slaves were doing across land, so you could hear, because you can hear the drums for so far. So it's a method of communication. And then just on and on throughout, a history of America, you get into blues music. And I've often, a concept I came up with recently, I've said that the only two forms of music we make in this country are blues and protest music. And it's really just blues, because protest music is blues music. So all we've been making is blues music from the beginning of time. And it's just the technology and the circumstances change, and that allows these different genres to form up. But it's all just blues music. We're always just protesting the situation that we're in right now. So I just feel like music is so important to us as a people. And then just in American culture, without, Black music, you don't have music in America. It just informs every form of music that's ever come out of America. And that goes with, from everyone. So I just feel it's just so important just to give this country a soul. Because a lot of this country doesn't have it, because this country is, based on capitalism and colonialism. And so the music side of it, the response to that, to capitalism and colonialism, has been this formation of this music that we all thrive and live through. So I think it's just beyond important.
So those of us who agree with you that it has that importance, I got to inject a little bit of myself here. Mm-hmm. When I was young, I always looked at older people that were kind of out of the loop with music. I'm like, man, those people are dead inside. I just never want to be that person. And here I am in my middle age, and I'm spouting the same cliches that I heard.
Don't
people.
Do that.
So for those of us who don't feel that resonance in today's music culture, who don't feel like it's about the important topics, correct me.
Yeah.
Point me to some glimmers of hope that are out there in today's music.
Oh God, there's so many. I think that's the problem. I think as we get older, because we grow up with stuff, and going back to that, first exposure. you're never going to hear something like Tribe Called Quest, at least for me. I'm never going to hear a Low End Theory or Midnight Marauders again. I'm never going to be 18 years old and hearing, Enter the Wu-Tang. It's never going to hear, like, I'm never going to hear Jimi Hendrix, like, when my uncle gave me the Band of Gypsies album. I'm never going to hear that for the first time again. But it's always this idea that, don't get stuck on that. Because like you said, we hear the same things. I remember when I was a kid, people would be like, oh, hip-hop is dead. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And now you hear, oh, hip-hop is dead.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, but fam, this is, like, what do you mean it's dead? If you're saying it was dead 20 years ago, how is it dead now? What's the difference? It's always going to be a large amount of terrible stuff. And you're always going to have to dig through it. And I think as a kid, and when you're younger, you have time to dig through it. Because we all, like, I know when I was growing up in the 90s, something like the radio's trash. Everything they play on the radio is garbage. And I would be in the store, okay, what are they not playing on the radio? Go to the store, talk to the people in the store, talk to the DJs, talk to the, guys working the store. What are they not playing on the radio? Give me that album. And so now it's like we don't do that. I mean, one, we don't have as many stores, we don't have as many places. But it's like you have to adjust. Like, I go to the internet, I go and talk to other DJs still. I talk to people. And so Glimmers of Hope, I always talk about people like, there's Toby Inigwe, who's a little bit older now, but he's, a newer artist who, is making really revolutionary music. I think Kendrick is one of those cats who's like one of these ultra talented, like once in a lifetime artists, that you have to really appreciate the same way you appreciate a Michael Jackson, a Prince, any of these people. I think you have to appreciate the Kendricks. I think we have to always just keep looking. That's the thing. Don't ever get stuck and be like, oh man, what I like is what's good. Because that's just not true. That's just, because there was good music before you, there's going to be good music after you. Yeah. So just don't get stuck.
All right, but so you can get me a playlist after this, right?
Got you.
Okay, all right. I need that. Okay. So you talk about the importance of music, and you also talk about how not just music, but the communicative aspect of sound itself predates language. Yeah. And, Hendrix's character who is known for a unique sound. And I've also written a book about a character who's known for their sound. And I want to ask you, as an interesting contrast to that, when you're dealing with a character known for their sound, talk a little about the importance of the concept of silence.
That's interesting. And that's something, well, one, I go back to Miles, who's on my shirt, who Miles said that the notes we don't play are just as important as the notes we do play. So like the phrasing in between the silence, and that leads to rhythm and everything. Silence and pausing leads to rhythm and how you flow and all these things. So it's just as important. And then the other side of it was figuring out how to translate someone who is music and who is noise and sound into a medium that has none of that. And we were trying to, we were really trying to make sure that the songs conveyed the feeling of the music, and that even through the art you could understand it. And one of the first conversations that I had with Tom Mandrake, where we just immediately clicked, is we were like, we don't want to see the little squiggly musical notes floating around the page. Right. That's so cliche and so tired. And so we were like, okay, but how can we convey this music? And since we're using his lyrics, you can go look up these songs, you can see the lyrics that we use in each page and hear the song. So we're like, okay, how can we, because if you hear the song, I want you to be, when you see the page without hearing the song, I want you to really hear that song. Yeah. So we were trying to get for the more energetic, make it energy, flowing through the page, and for the sad things, more, somber, etc., things of that nature. Yeah. Yeah.
And you managed to even turn the creative energy of Hendrix itself into a manifestation in the story. And that worked really well. You talk about Tom's approach to music. Tell us a little bit more about your relationship with your artists, how you found them, how the concept developed visually.
Well, they found us basically. Tom was already working on the project before we came to it. They've been trying to get this off the ground for a few years, so they already had Tom. And the funny thing about it is, Tom is an absolute legend. I've said this over and over again. I'll say it to the day I die. He is just one of the greats. But I didn't know him for anything like I grew up reading a lot of Marvel and not so much DC. And when I grew up, Tom was doing a lot of DC, and he did like the Spectre and a bunch of horror stuff that I had no interest in because I just wasn't interested in horror at all. So when they first were like, okay, you got the book, you know, we like your pitch, you're good to go. Tom Mandrake is your artist. So I'm like, cool. Who is that? You know, I didn't say that, but you know, that was my thought.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, I have no idea who that is. So I go to Google and I'm immediately, oh my God, this guy's a monster. Like, he's unreal. You know, I'm looking at all his old stuff, all his news. I'm like, what the fuck? You know, this dude is crazy. I can do anything here. You know, and then we got on the phone and we just clicked immediately. You know, Tom is just super laid back. He's a Jimi Hendrix fanatic from young, so he knows probably more about Jimmy than I do. And he just really loved this book. And then he really loved us, which was really, it's still, everything about this book is really mind-blowing to me, it being my first comic book. You know, it being like, when I tell other writers, oh, Tom Mandrake did my art, they're like, fuck? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I know, man, it's crazy, you know? Like, who would have thought? Yeah. So, everything about it is just insane. But, you know, working with Tom and working with, I also want to make sure I shout out Justin Prokovich, who did our colors. And Justin is also, you know, a god on this earth when it comes to what they do. And so I just wanted to make sure they both get their credit. But it was just a blessing, man. I don't know if I'll, you know, once again, we're going back to that, you know, repeating things. Like, I know I'll do more comics. I know I'm going to work with a million other great artists. But this first time, like, the first time Tom sent me back pencils, was like, yo, what the fuck, bro? Like, you took what I wrote and turned it into this? This is stupid. Like, there's a 2-page spread that opens the book. I've looked at it thousands of times. I can't tell you how many hours I've sat there just looking at that 2-page spread, like, yo. So, yeah, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, and I just thank Tom and Justin so much. For they taught me so much about collaboration, about trusting others, about letting them work, and shutting the fuck up and not telling them what to do. I apologize to Justin in person. I do it every time. I'm sorry, man. I learned, because I told Justin something early on and I was wrong, and it was just like, shut up, dude. Let this dude work. And that's what I learned.
Very cool.
Cool.
So I just got a couple questions left. Do you have a sense yet? You said this is your first comic.
Yeah.
What's it been like? You work on this thing for so long, and you finally get it out there. What's it been like to experience, the release of a book?
It's crazy. It's been wonderful, and again, you know how it is. We work on these things in private for so long, and then you go through all these things with editors, with publishers, with your artists, going back and forth, revision after revision, and then especially for this, we were finished with it for a minute, like. I think I did my final fighter, which was really just a little touch-up lettering pass in March. And then the book didn't come out till August. And even that lettering pass, I've been done with it maybe a year before that, other than little edits, tiny edits. So it was a long wait for this book to come out. And then when it finally did come out, and we've done a couple of signings, we're here down in Gulf Coast, and then we did New York Comic Con, and that was my first. I've done a million New York Comic Cons. I think I've been going 10 years straight, but I'm always interviewing. I'm doing it as a journalist and not on the other side. So that was the first time I ever tabled. And just to see people walk by and be like, what? Jimi Hendrix. And then I'm like, yeah, Jimi Hendrix. And then I'm like, yeah, but it's Jimi Hendrix in space. There we go. Yeah, I boiled that down to those 4 words. And those 4 words, I was so mad that I didn't record everyone's look when you say Jimi Hendrix in space, because the look on their faces was the funniest thing to me. And so getting that reaction and people reading it and then people hitting me back the other day on Blue Sky, someone posted a panel and they're like, this is one of my favorite panels from this year. And they're like, it means so much in this time because it's when Hendrix is talking about, they keep bringing this old sound to us, but they don't know this world has found a new rhythm. And we're moving on past what they're trying to throw at us. And I'm, they got it, and that's what this was for. Like Mello, my partner, said this book was for a warm hug for, this time. Like people who need it right now, that's what this book was for. So to see that and see people getting it, and getting the ideas and really clicking on it, or I threw all these little Easter egg references in it, and there's a De La Soul Easter egg reference in there. I didn't think any but maybe my sister and a few other people would catch it, and dude reviewed it, and he's like, man, what about that De La Soul reference? I'm like, yeah, that's amazing, because I just didn't think anyone would catch that type of stuff. So that little, it's like just seeing people's reactions. It's again, we keep going back to this thing, and first time, and it's like I'll never be able to repeat this, and it's been the best.
Awesome, that's good. Yeah. That's good to hear. So one last question for those of us who are somewhat familiar or relatively familiar with Hendrix's music, give us a hidden gem track, an underrated track that you want us to hear.
Ooh.
And if not necessarily a specific underrated track, maybe a specific performance of one of the more well-known tracks that doesn't get as much play.
I would definitely just say for both, because my first answer is always the Band of Gypsies album. And apologize to the Romani people. We know that is a slur and the name shouldn't be used, and we do our best, but it is the name of the album. And I just think that album is like, cause that's the first one that I heard. Like, I'd heard Hendrix songs, but that was the first album I'd heard. And I just think, like, Machine Gun, it's just one of those songs where it's like, yo, this man was really saying something, and that's the type of music that really gets me. And then to hear Machine Gun, and it's like, the drummer, the way he imitates a machine gun with the drums. And that whole album, man, They Don't Know is like one of the funkiest joints I've ever heard. And then recently I got into it. It's a compilation album, but it's official, so I can't say it. It's the Hendrix Blues album, where they compiled all of his like blues performance and stuff. Incredible. Because it's just so different than, it's a lot of acoustic stuff. It's so different than all the real blaring, when he's really just, bringing that fire out of him, the flames out. It's more subdued, really chill type music. And so that's what I would definitely recommend, that Hendrix Blues album, to anyone.
Okay, cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me, man.
Thank you,
Love
brother.
the book.
This is so awesome. Thank you.
All right.